Not a day goes by that I'm not grateful to be serving at this period of time. Being able to undergo a full gender transition beyond hormones, laser hair removal, Botox, lip injections, hair lowering, like literally cannot be more thankful to be alive now.
We are leaving wokeness and weakness behind. No more pronouns, no more climate change obsession, no more emergency vaccine mandates, no more dudes in dresses. We're done with that.
It just warms my heart to see wokeness being defeated at every turn. And as you can see over here, yes, the Supreme Court has indeed upheld Donald Trump's ban on transgenders in the military, okay? Now, of course, this is just temporary while all of the court cases work through the system. But in the meantime, yes, Donald Trump can go ahead and say, nah, we don't need anybody with some type of mental disorder going out there and pointing guns at other people, okay? So what we're going to see today, of course, is Scott Jennings on CNN not really doing that well in terms of making the argument as to why this is a good thing. But before we get to these clips, don't forget to like and comment on this video so we can break through the algorithms. Here we go.
Argument, Elena, that the Trump administration is making here is that that allowing transgender troops to serve hurts lethality and it hurts readiness. What do you say to that?
Well, there's no evidence of that. I think that, if that was the case, we've seen transgender people serving honorably for the last several years. And what has changed between now and then? They've just woken up to a new administration who has a different outlook on their ability to serve. So I think that, if you talk to people who are serving on active duty alongside transgender troops, they're not making these complaints. The leaders in the military are not making these complaints. These are political complaints about military service. So I think that all of the courts that have looked at this issue and looked at it, and said there's nothing in fact to back up what the government is claiming here. In fact, the judges challenged them to produce evidence, and they couldn't produce any evidence. So I think it's a really dark day for our country, where basically we're allowed to discriminate against a class of people.
Scott, if they can't produce evidence that this actually does, in fact, have an impact on readiness, I mean, how is this not then just discrimination?
Well, it's the opinion of the commander-in-chief, who, according to our Constitution, is the head of the military. I mean, regardless of anyone's opinion or anybody's, whatever side you're on, whether you're for it or against it, at some juncture, the president is the commander-in-chief of the military, and he has and should have broad latitude to determine how the armed forces should be operated. And so I think that's what he's doing here. I think that's ultimately what the court said today, was that the president is the commander-in-chief, and we gotta respect that. Under our Constitution.
But I mean, to her point, if there's not a downside, and it's been going on for years now, and I mean, I'm just presenting your argument to them.
Yeah.
What is the argument other than Trump, Hegseth just doesn't want trans people in the military?
Well, I mean, I think that the president, we'll ultimately see. I think that's why the court is allowing the president to move forward with this until it works itself through the court system. Maybe the Supreme Court will be the final arbiter here to say, yeah or nay, you can do this. But ultimately, I think the court is showcasing deference to the executive, saying that, look, you're the president, you're over the military. You do, for the most part, get to sort of dictate the standards of our military. And I don't really see how you can push back against that. Again, we'll see what happens in the court.
I can. I'm sorry, I can. What if the president wakes up tomorrow and says, I don't want any black people in the military? Do we give deference to him on that? Well, no, wait a second. It's not ridiculous. It's not ridiculous because you're discriminating against a group of people in a a similar way. No,
I knew you were going to say that, but
excuse me. Well, I'm glad you.
I'm leave this one alone today.
I'm curious. Why is it ridiculous? I mean, you just said the president should be the one who just decides.
Right.
So if he decides, he wakes up tomorrow and says, I think it's bad for morale, it's bad for cohesiveness, for there to be black people in the military, Latino people in the military, just in her hypothetical scenario, what's the difference between that and what we're seeing here?
I mean, are you really going to go down this ridiculous road?
I'm sorry.
This is ridiculous. It is a ridiculous argument.
Well, okay.
The president,
what they've already
the president and the Secretary of
Defense
Defense have an argument here. They believe that readiness and unit cohesion and overall operations of the military are impacted by this. That is their opinion, And that is the opinion of the commander-in-chief, who the Constitution gives broad latitude to run the armed forces. So that's their opinion. You're allowed to have one. You're allowed to have one. You're also allowed to run for president and become commander-in-chief yourself. But until you do, he's the commander-in-chief.
I have to just say, I didn't hear an answer to the hypothetical, right? I just didn't hear it. I didn't. I mean, okay, the definition of discrimination, according to the American Psychological Association, discrimination is the unfair or prejudicial treatment of people or groups based on characteristics such as race, gender, age, or sexual orientation. What is the difference between, prohibiting certain groups like transgender people from serving versus, people based on their race or even their gender, frankly?
I personally think there's a difference, and I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, I will say...
Do you believe that race and... Are you saying that the quality of race and the quality of transgender are the same?
I'm just asking the question because I think you're making there's a distinction, but you're not explaining why.
No, I'm asking, you guys brought up the hypothetical. Are you arguing that someone's race is the same as someone choosing to become transgender?
But your argument, you've made the argument twice that the commander-in-chief's opinion is all that matters. You've said that twice now.
Well, under the Constitution, yes.
So if he wakes up tomorrow and says it's not okay to be gay or lesbian and serve, because that's his opinion, there's nothing to back that up. They meet the physical standards, they meet the intellectual standards, they have voluntarily decided to serve their country, to give their life for this country. So many of us don't have to. That it's the opinion without any basis in fact that's what matters more than the Constitution of equal rights and equal protection.
So Scott Jennings, in my opinion, is losing this argument. He's being backed into a corner by the leftists, right? Maybe you don't see it that way, but that's kind of what I'm watching. Now, the reason why this is happening is because him and Sir Michael Singleton are both being too nice with this whole argument, right? They're going to the idea that, yes, Donald Trump is in fact commander-in-chief, and as such, he can go ahead and make rules and regulations involving people joining the military, okay? But then, of course, the leftist idea is, okay, if Donald Trump can in fact bar people from joining the military like transgenders, then why not blacks? All right. And that sounds like a really good argument until you realize this. All right. Transgenderism is a mental disorder, and the military does in fact have rigorous mental standards for people who are allowed to join. OK, so once you actually bring that argument into the forefront, yes, these people are not just simply folks choosing a different lifestyle. These are people who actually believe they are something they are not. This is a mental disorder 100%, and was recognized as such up until about 8 or 10 years ago, when the leftists seemed to take over academia and the medical institutions. Okay, so that's exactly what we're seeing here. Now, as far as the other claims about readiness and lethality, okay, let's go ahead and go down this road as well. Someone who's actually had a transition surgery, okay, say we have male to female, guess what they have to do on a daily basis? They got to stretch things out in a very painful fashion. They got to pop out that fake uteri and get it cleaned and do things like that on a daily basis. They have to keep certain areas clean because your body is trying to heal the unnatural wound that you have given it. Okay, and that is not something you can do on a battlefield. That is not something you can do at the drop of a hat if you're under enemy fire. Okay, so yes, this will of course affect readiness. This will affect lethality, because there is no safe place in a war zone to perform the required medical upkeep. But then of course the final argument that's being presented there is that nobody has a problem with this except for Donald Trump and his followers, right? Everybody is perfectly okay with it, right? The ranking military members, the servicemen themselves. Well, okay, let's look into that. Why in the world do we now have a record amount of people joining the military now that Donald Trump has come in and said we're getting rid of all the wokeness? Does that make it sound like everyone's okay with it and everyone agrees with this and everyone wants to be hunkered down in a foxhole next to somebody who doesn't know who the heck they are? Okay, yeah, it doesn't really sound like that argument holds water either. So of course, this all makes perfect sense when you boil it down to exactly what it is. Transgenderism, people can go ahead and live their lives however they want, but the military is not the place for experimentation, and it is definitely not the place for people with psychological disorders. Okay, so by all means, Donald Trump, keep this up, and hopefully the lawsuits will all bear this out and hopefully get some honesty back in our medical diagnoses. All right, so thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and say hi to your mom for me.